Like even at our price ranges of headphones, there's a lot of things I like to do, but we can't afford because the headphone would be $50,000, $100,000. I commonly see people complaining a lot about engineers and not designing things that people want to buy.
No way.
People always say that things are designed in such a way that they're not repairable, serviceable, or why they do it this way, or why is it like this, or why is it so expensive, why is it so cheap, right? I think that it deserves a discussion.
Sure, why not? Kind of expand on one of the videos we just did a couple videos ago.
Yeah, brought up some concerns.
What is the title of that one? Yeah, it'll show on the screen.
It's got a title. We'll link it somewhere.
Yeah. Well, we just talked about things like manufacturing.
Sort of, but there's a bit to expand here because I think people fail to understand overwhelmingly engineers that design things, they want to make cool stuff. Almost every time. The primary goal is how can I make something that's cool? Now, of course, the reality is it needs to be made. So it needs to be able to be made in a reasonable quantity, in a mass production thing. And it needs to be cheap enough that people are willing to buy it. Because if you can't sell it, if nobody's willing to make it, if nobody wants to buy it, well, no business is going to make it. You're not going to make any money on it, right?
I think they call that a pipe dream.
Right. Well, it only works like in like a few industries where you actually could do exactly that.
Like NASA?
Well, no, not quite.
There's
They're
very
still
few
constrained. They're still constrained. But like, like your ultra hypercars where it's one guy's dream car. He designed the whole thing the way he wants it.
For 10 years.
Yeah, and it costs $4 million.
Even that's sort of misleading, though, because I think overwhelmingly things like that, people say it's the exact perfect dream car. Right. I don't think it is.
Probably not.
Like even at our price ranges of headphones, there's a lot of things I like to do, but we can't afford because the headphone would be $50,000, $100,000.
Well, one thing that strikes me right away on cars like that is, first of all, it needs to have 4 tires.
Not necessarily.
Well, 3, but still, at least 4 tires.
You could put like 12 tires.
I mean, there's no way around it. If you say, well, I like a car that doesn't have tires, well, you're going to have you got a long stretch to get there.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
But to some extent, there's limitations.
Talk
There's always
Doc Brown about that.
Sometimes, as an engineer, you might be like, I wish I could do this thing, but technically it's not achievable. I can't find a plastic that meets the specifications. I can't find a metal that I can machine that would do this. There's no material available. And sometimes there's companies big enough that they dream up a material. They figure out their own. They figure out a way around it. But that could cost millions, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars. Sometimes. And you see the aerospace industry do this. Rockets and stuff like that. Sometimes it's just they know the scale they're going to be operating at. They have to make a material to make it work because there's demand.
Isn't Tesla?
SpaceX.
Yeah, they're using a custom alloy.
Pretty much everybody is.
Stainless
that's sort of misleading, though. I doubt it's like some crazy unobtainium, but
it
most likely it's
already.
a custom blend so that the attributes they're looking for are centered on their use case. Yeah. But there's a lot of stuff like that. Whereas someone like us, like our company, not only does nobody want to deal with you at the volume you're dealing, but oftentimes as a business, you can't afford to do it physically. So there's all these things that I would like to do, and pretty much the few engineers I know, they always overwhelmingly want to do cool things. They want to design stuff that's like just great, awesome stuff that doesn't exist, but it's usually too expensive. Yeah. Nobody wants to make it. And inevitably you say, hey, I would like to do this or whatever. Then some sales guy or something like that, some finance guy will come to you and say, well, we can't sell that. We can't make money at that.
In larger companies, you got marketing that basically kind of dictates what they think people will buy, what the company can sell. And you got the cheese balls up top that are deciding how much they really want to throw at this project. The ultimate decision is theirs, and they're using input from marketing. They're using input from engineers, and
they're gauging risk, right? They're saying, well, what's it going to cost?
Yeah.
What's the likelihood that we sell enough to make our money back?
Will we be successful in even doing it to begin with? You could spend a shit ton of money, and
sometimes
in the end, you can't get it done.
Well, it's like Apple with that Air Power mat that never came out. They spent like all this time, and they had like all these prototypes, and like it kind of worked, but then they just canned the whole thing.
Yeah.
Never came out.
Yeah.
But see, that only works because Apple has strong profit margins.
Yeah.
And they're a very large company.
I wonder why they couldn't make it work. It doesn't seem like that difficult.
Well, it doesn't seem that difficult, but they had a lot of smart people, and they couldn't get it to work.
Yeah, it's just a surface area issue, I think.
Because they wanted it to work anywhere, not have like 3 spots.
Yeah.
I would imagine the major issue is just the cost.
I thought there was a couple aftermarket companies that did did come up with.
It was misleading. No, it was just multiple antennas.
Yeah. I see. So there is always a spot where you got to
My understanding is what Apple was trying to seek there is high power wireless charging over literally any surface, any area on this surface at high efficiency.
Right.
Because of course, the issue there is you could transmit 15 watts wirelessly. It's trivial. The trouble there is doing it efficiently enough so that you don't get significant heating.
Yeah, you got to add iron. You got to have somewhere to concentrate your field, which is going to absorb. Yeah, you're losing efficiency.
If you start getting bad efficiency, which is common in wireless charging, if you have your antennas misaligned, then you get an issue where you have a lot of heating costs in one or both the receivers, the antennas or whatever, and the heat's got to go somewhere. So now you need a bigger device with active cooling, and it looks unsightly, and it's very expensive.
It's one of these catch-22 situations.
Yeah, that I'm sure it came down to they probably could make it work, but it'd be like bulky and extremely expensive.
And cost a fortune.
Who's buying a $300
If it's 2 inches thick, it's a big fan on it, it's loud, it's 10 pounds. Yeah.
Agreed.
Nobody's going to buy it.
Yeah, get it.
So they probably thought they can do it, but then when they actually got down to it, it's like...
I'm surprised, though. I mean, there seems like there'd be an ingenious way to do that. You know,
well, obviously they thought there was.
Yeah.
They didn't figure it out.
Someone didn't come up with it yet.
Right.
Maybe I'll take a look at that.
That's overwhelmingly the reality. That's actually a fair example.
Yeah.
Because that's usually how things go. Somebody dreams up an idea and they're like, conceptually, this is sick. It would be a great idea. I would like to be able to do this. It's got a huge amount of technical engineering hurdles to overcome to be able to achieve it. And then inevitably in most companies, you don't have the resources, you don't have the money, you don't foresee consumer demand, you can't make it happen with your suppliers, your skills, your talent, or whatever. Occasionally you get the ring light and it goes through, but overwhelmingly it's just too expensive. That's kind of the issue.
Well, it did kind of push their ultimate solution, which was MagSafe then, right?
Yeah.
Because they knew they could do that, alignment magnets. So instead of having it put it anywhere, have it aligned.
They have a patent on that.
Yeah, so they kind of
solved
it in a different direction. They knew how magnets worked. So
see, that kind of actually highlights probably a lot of the challenges that they saw. They said, well, instead of worrying about alignment, how about we just have perfect alignment every time? Then you could wirelessly charge, but obviously you have very good coupling, so you could get good transmission. You could get high consistent power with high efficiency.
Yeah, they got magnets in the iPads to hold the covers, and they're directional magnets and all this good stuff, and they got that figured out.
Plus the MagSafe for the phone is like $30, so and there's no way the AirPower is going to be $30. So.
Right, it probably would have been like $800 or something, and 2 inches thick with a fan in it.
So, where are we?
Well, someone started out with a grand idea, and then they kind of realized.
And it does, on paper, it does seem like you look at it and go, why not? If you can make it this big, why not make it this big? Seems like it wouldn't be that difficult.
Then you start talking to people that are doing it, and you go, oh.
Yeah, right.
That's why. Yeah. Right? Because pretty much everything I do, when I design a thing, I want to make it as cheap as possible. And I think I speak for most people at this point. And most people that are designing products, they want to make the product as cheap as possible, which is intrinsically obvious, I think, because it means more people buy it, more people get to experience and use it. Right? Like usually you want to make a thing that more people use rather than less. You don't want to make one of an item.
If a platform that charges things costs more than the 5 phones you're putting on
fewer people will buy it.
Well,
it ain't going to be too popular.
There are some novelty things that don't work like that, though. If you're just making stuff out of gold just to make it out of gold.
Yeah, okay.
Well, that's cool.
That's different,
but that ain't Apple.
Generally, when you're putting a lot of time, thought, effort into something, you want to make something that people buy and enjoy. The trouble there is inevitably you go to someone that deals with the finances. You say, hey, here's what we want to make. This is what we expect at the cost. And you have a vague idea maybe of the sell price because you sort of have to understand what it's going to sell at to be able to understand what it can cost when you're manufacturing it. But inevitably they go, well, we can't sell it at that price. And they start listing the reasons. And it's always like, oh, you're right. So we can't make it for that. We can't make this product. And you always got to figure out a way to make the best version of the product that consumers are actually able to afford and buy and want to spend the money on. And there's a ton of products that you could make. But the demand just isn't there.
There is another way that you could look at this too, especially from a business point of view, is that what else could you be doing if you didn't do that?
Well, that is actually
how much money would how much money would be making if you did something else that was easier to do than that? I mean, and because you are tying up resources, engineering resources, all kinds of resources, money, everything.
Yeah, for a trivial project.
To do something that may not pan out versus we could do 10 other projects that we know are gold, good as gold. So, that's why I think a lot of this stuff is just winds up being on paper and never goes anywhere. It's in the back of people's minds. And engineers, like you said, always want to do this.
Yeah, wouldn't this be cool? But
but in the end, it
doesn't work.
Yeah, in the end, it's too much like work.
That's actually a fair point because this is something that I think overwhelmingly people fail to understand as well. It's not really even about the time or even necessarily directly the opportunity cost and maybe the direct perceptual sense, because the issue there is you can't necessarily always find people to do the job, especially when you're doing high-end things, creative stuff that's physically demanding or pushing the boundaries of manufacturing and things like that. And especially in those cases, it's very difficult to hire people for jobs like that. So you can't just say, oh, we'll get 10 people, we'll throw it at the problem. And you almost never get linear scaling. You very rarely get much scaling at all.
Well, yeah, and primarily because employees tend to not be as into it as the guy with the idea.
He has one or two people, yeah.
It's hard to find people that are as motivated as you are.
People talk about this a lot, but if you have a room of 10 people, you could probably get something done. But if you throw 100 people at it, you might actually be slower at getting that project done. And it might end up being worse. It
doesn't scale.
And then you start throwing thousands of people at it. It doesn't necessarily mean it gets done any faster.
Same with manufacturing. The economies of scale varied for each process. It just depends on what you're doing.
Well, what that means is if you have a skilled team, if you have a team of people that are passionate and care and want to develop really cool stuff and are excited to do it, there is a severe opportunity cost I think the consumer doesn't recognize. Because if they're doing something that's sort of not going to benefit many people because they're doing something that's technically interesting that they think is novel, but really only people that are in the art would think it's novel, then there's a huge opportunity cost because you're not going to sell any.
There is this thing called motivation,
and you could be doing something else.
Which, projects like that do tend to motivate your people, gets them out of a potential rut that they might already be in. The company itself could also be in a rut too.
Yeah, Nissan comes to mind here.
Tell me
they did
about
that
it.
with the GTR.
Yeah, right. And it was a huge.
And they had the whole thing with the CEO.
It's all Goshen.
But now they're back to where they were before the GTR.
Yeah, right. Because they don't have another Goshen.
Right.
And I mean, it just shows that the guy at the top, if he has a dream and he can get it implemented, to scale, wow. But it's like you said, it's rare.
Usually there's no money in it.
Comes to fruition.
That's the real issue. So you got to convince people that are only looking at the numbers. You got to say, well, I want to do this because I think it's cool.
Especially if you're borrowing.
Right. No. I hope other people think it's cool.
That's right.
Yeah.
But then they're like, well, there's no money in it. And you got to somehow convince them to be like, well, let's just do it anyways.
Well, the thing in like Apple's case, I mean, they didn't need to go into debt to make AirPower, right? They had the cash.
Right.
But clearly, I guess in the end, because I wanted AirPower, because it was a nice novel solution. I thought it was cool. I've been waiting for it to come out. But in reality, the current MagSafe solution is pretty much all I really needed, right? It works great.
Yeah.
And
I think
it's cheap.
The biggest issue probably is the cost didn't make sense to the value presented to the consumer, because they probably recognize like the difficulty to make this is so staggering that if you put it anywhere in the thing, you get uniform charge power and whatever.
It's just
the
not
consumer doesn't really care enough about that.
It's not consumer friendly.
Like
either.
it's so impossible to do that the consumer probably doesn't benefit enough from it. They just shelved it.
Yeah, juice, squeeze. I mean, the end result is the same.
Well, I think everyone's got an outlet strip where they're charged shit nowadays. So.
Right. Well, what does it matter if your phone charges at the same power when you move it slightly over?
Right.
To the average consumer, whoop-de-doo.
I just wait. I move it till I see the little LED light come on. And I'm like,
oh, you don't have a MagSafe?
No, no. Is that a better thing to get? I got this round disc that just sits on the floor.
Yeah, it is. It's just a little round pocket.
No, it ain't an Apple product.
Oh.
Yeah.
The issue with those is they don't tell you this, but you get very large variances in charge rate based on the location of the antennas, based on the placement and the alignment. And no device tends to tell you the actual charge rate. So you move it slightly, you might get 30% worse efficiency, and as a result, much lower charge rates to minimize the heating. But it doesn't tell you anything. And obviously Apple determined that's not a good user experience where you could be on the edge and it's charging at 1.4 watts and it takes forever because of the efficiency, because of the poor coupling.
I think we went way off topic with Apple.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, it's the same. It's the right topic.
It's the same thing.
It's funny how Apple tends to present itself as an shining example of
they're an example
what to do, what not to do.
Yeah.
I mean, they've
sort of.
They've kind of
they
figured it out.
have a lot of money, and they throw it at problems that most people can't afford to.
Yeah. So when you see their end solution, that's pretty much, I mean, it's not end game, but it's their current end solution where the engineering stopped and it became a viable product, right? That they know they'll sell millions and millions and millions of pieces.
Well, that's the big thing. They know that it has to be made in high volume at an affordable price.
Yeah. So they are a cool example. And, even to be able to take a 1/10% of that to scale in a different company is cool, or their methodology or whatever.
Well, they do a lot of custom parts, and I think, generally speaking, that's the sort of type of thing that makes engineers excited and motivated to design new things. You could design something that doesn't exist, because overwhelmingly it seems people want a slightly different version of what already exists. I think that's silly.
I just miss Steve.
Oh,
I liked it when he was on the stage and he talked and told you what was going on, and he dumbed it down where people got excited about it, and you know, I mean, that's too bad. I missed that because that was you know, he was not only that, he was the visionary, you know, and so he had some cool ideas that actually came about, like the iPhone.
Right.
Know? I remember when that first came out. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I'll buy one. I'll see what happens. Like, whoa.
It was a big deal then. People didn't even understand what it was.
But that was a different Apple back then. They didn't have the money they had then. It had a lot of off-the-shelf parts. Yeah. Now everything's...
Yeah, you look at the first-gen iPhone, it was made out of pretty much bricks that you go buy at the store. Yeah. Everything now was custom.
It was cool, though.
Well, for the time,
Yeah, it was cool.
For the time.
Wow, a map in my hand that told me where I was.
Yeah, don't use one now, though. You'd be like, oh, I forgot.
They're really slow.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we kind of covered more of that in depth a little bit, and
maybe people could complain about engineers in the comments.
Yeah, there you go.
I see people a lot of times saying, especially on like cars.
What's there to complain about?
Everything. People always complain. Oh, you mean the damn engineers? It's not the engineers' fault.
Well, that's half the truth.
They didn't have the information.
It depends how good your engineers are.
Yeah, it can be. It can be their fault.
No, sometimes it is.
Yeah.
Usually it isn't though.
It depends on the guys in charge.
They just want to make cool things.
Blame it on the boss, man.
I want to make everything as cheap as possible. It's just I want to make cool things too.
Yeah,
it costs a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, therein lies the balance.
Yes.
Take care, everyone. Make sure to thumbs us up and subscribe. Hit subscribe. Go to your computer if you're on a TV. Log in to
They really got to add that, right?
Go to YouTube
for TVs.
The Biz headphones. Subscribe. Yeah, there's no way to do it. Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
You can't like it.
You got to like click through 14 buttons on some TVs. It's a real hassle.
Oh, by the way, we should have mentioned, but it was really cool. Last video we did, how many people stayed at the end.
They made it to the end,
There must be at least 80 comments of people saying, hey, I'm at the end. I always see the end of your videos. That's pretty cool. You're always saying 3 or 4. Oh, no.
Maybe that's all it should be.
At least 80. Thanks, everyone. Take care.